Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here to show you how you can achieve that lo-fi radio vocal effect within your heavy mixes. Now, just recently, I've had a few people ask how you can achieve that Chino Deftones type of radio vocal effect, so I figured I'd do a video on it. It's something I do in a lot of my mixes, and to be honest, it really comes in handy, and it doesn't take anything fancy or any hard technique or anything like that. It's very straightforward. So without any further ado, I'm gonna play the audio sample back, and then I'm going to explain step by step how I achieved this lo-fi radio vocal effect. So as you can hear, that's the typical effect. It makes the vocal sound otherworldly, like it's coming through an old school radio. Now, I use this effect a lot when I want a vocal to sound a little more subdued and a little more dreamlike. And again, it doesn't take any fancy plugin or any fancy technique. It's very straightforward. So let's take a look at how I do it. So here is my vocal track. I have a few plugins on my chain. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bypass all of them, and let's listen to our raw vocal.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
That was just a vocal recorded through an SM7B through my very old PreSonus preamp. Nothing fancy. So first up in my chain, I am using an amp sim. And in this case, I'm using the ancient stock Pro Tools amp sim plugin, the SansAmp PSA1. The key here is I want the vocal to have color and to be slightly distorted. So let's take a listen to what this plugin is doing.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
So even though my vocal doesn't sound overly lo-fi yet, it's still helping my vocal sound otherworldly. Now, I just want to mention this. You can use any distortion plugin to accomplish this task, but I found that amp sims tend to work best. Because remember, an amp sim is modeling the preamp section of a guitar amplifier or bass amplifier, and also a speaker cab and mic placement. Now, because of this, it's gonna really help put the vocal in a separate sonic space than if you were to use just basic distortion. So before we move on to the next plugin in the chain, I wanna show you exactly what I mean. So I'm gonna bypass this amp sim plugin, and let's try a regular distortion plugin. Now, this is another stock distortion plugin that comes with Pro Tools that I use all the time, more as a tape saturator. In my opinion, it really helps add some analog color to a sound, but for this type of effect, it's just not extreme enough, in my opinion. Let's take a listen.
There's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
And now let's compare that to the amp sim plugin.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
So as you can tell, the simple amp sim plugin does a better job of making the vocal sound a little less present and a little more like it's in another dimension or something, like it's not there, almost like it's in a dreamlike state. Now, in my opinion, the amp sim plugin you use really doesn't matter as long as it's an amp sim plugin. That's what's gonna give you the result that you're really after. So now the next step after the amp sim plugin is some heavy filtering. And I'm using the stock Pro Tools EQ. And as you can tell, I am not being shy with both my high pass and low pass filters. I'm filtering out everything below 900 Hertz and everything above 3K. And let's take a listen to what this filter is doing to my vocal.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
So not only is the amp sim helping the vocal sound lo-fi, but this extreme filtering is making it sound like it's coming through like an old school radio or something. It's just really helping thin out the vocal and focusing only the mid-range of the vocal sound. Now, I want to quickly mention this. When it comes to compression, you're going to want to compress post EQ. The reason why is if you compress before your EQ, your compressor is going to be reacting to the low end in the vocal that's not even being used in the mix anyway. So that's why if you look here, I have my compressor sitting after my EQ. Again, if you have your compressor before your EQ, especially when you're EQing so heavily like this, your compressor is going to be reacting to the full range of frequencies that exists in your vocal track. So there's a pro tip for you. When it comes to compressing this effect, compress after your EQ. So let's take a listen and see what this compressor is doing to my vocal sound.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
So the compressor's here just to even out the vocal and help the dynamic range sit a little more evenly within the mix. And I have around 6 to 12 dB of gain reduction kicking in on the compressor on some of the peaks of the vocal. So after that, I have a basic De-Esser. Now, even though we're filtering out all of the top end, some of those sibilances do sit in the mid-range. So because of this, it's good to have a De-Esser just in case sitting last in your plugin chain, just to catch some of the extreme sibilances. So let's take a look and see what's happening with the De-Esser.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
So as you can tell, some gain reduction is kicking in even though we're filtering so heavily. So if you're going for that Chino Marino, Deftones kind of vocal effect, you're going to want to add some delay and reverb. Now, I'm a huge fan of using typical sends, almost like you would have set up on an analog console, and this example is no exception. So I have a vocal reverb that I'm sending to a submix with a basic reverb plugin. Nothing fancy. Let's hear what that's doing to my vocal sound.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
Yeah, and I'm just using a basic plate setting. Now forgive me if I'm a little slow, I actually did this mix 9 years ago. I'm a huge fan of treating my DAW like it's an analog console. In other words, instead of having a bunch of reverb plugins on my individual tracks, I prefer to have just one and send multiple tracks to it. It'll help with your CPU usage as well as help you get right to creating and be a little more efficient within your mixes. Okay, and after my reverb, I have a delay send. Let's take a listen to what that's doing.
You know there's something that I can do on my own. It's well known.
So I do have a stereo delay set up on a send, and it's not even in tempo with the music. That's because I wanted this delay to sound a little chaotic and a little more like a deliberate effect. So again, just to quickly recap, there's an amp sim just to help add distortion. Now again, an amp sim, in my opinion, is gonna do a better job for this effect than a typical tape saturator or distortion plugin. And that's because an amp sim plugin is modeling a cab, mic placement, preamp section of a tube amplifier. It's just a little more extreme. From there, I have an EQ with some extreme filtering, everything below 900 Hertz and everything above 3K. A basic compressor just to help the vocals sit a little more evenly in the mix. A De-Esser just to help with some of the sibilances. And a vocal reverb and a vocal delay send. That's it. So let's take a listen to the effect once more in context. Not a bad little effect. It helps the vocal sit a little more in the background and not be so upfront in the bridge of the song where the dynamics are taken down a bit. So as you can see, it's a super simple effect. It's really easy to implement. You don't need any fancy tools in order to pull it off. You could accomplish this within any DAW. Now I'm curious to know, is this an effect that you use often within your mixes? And if you haven't used it in the past, is it an effect that you've heard and weren't quite sure on how to achieve it within your own mixes? Leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know. I'd love to hear your opinion. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And be sure to download my 5-step guide for better heavy mixes so you can achieve better results with the gear you have right now. There's a link below to the free guide right below in this video's description. Until next time, happy mixing.